Hello, welcome back to the Tears of Fire podcast, a podcast where I go over the last Dragon Chronicles by Chris DeLacy. Today we'll be going over the chapters 5 through 8 in Firestar, Book 3. Thank you for joining, and I hope you had a safe flight in and hit no turbulence. Let's get into the show. Chapter 5, A Sign in the Sky. I kind of like the way the beginning of this book is laid out. We're alternating every chapter between the two bears, Thoran and Ingvar, and the Penny Kettle's house. We do get our first chapter finally back with David and Zanna, our main characters. So that's kind of fun. But I did want to say that I am appreciating kind of the parallel storylines that will eventually connect into the future. I've always liked that in storytelling, whether that's a TV show that throws out multiple storylines and then connects them at the end of the series, or maybe even a book, or not a book, maybe even a movie franchise that'll take a couple of movies to connect, much like Marvel did. It took them 10 years to get all their stuff done, but each individual story added its own little spark and contributed to a story on a much larger scale. And when things are able to be planned out very nice and connect tightly towards the end, it just feels so good to read. So, chapter 5 starts out with Ingvar and Thorn still walking towards the town. It's in the night sky, and Thorn and Ingvar are having this conversation between one another. Ingvar's still a little confused as to why Thorn is out following the trail to the town as well, and Thorn lets him in on a little bit of his mission as well. He just tells him that he's following a sign. Ingvar tells Thoran to turn away, and he has no business going there or following him. Ingvar trots up ahead and turns toward Thoran, telling the old man bear to back up and turn around. He has no business going in the same direction. Thoran then explains to Ingvar that he's actually following a sign in the sky and tells him to look up at the stars and tries to read them. And when I was reading this, I just think that this would be a beautiful scene in a TV show or a movie. If you can be out on the ice caps, more than likely being able to see the northern lights, as well as these bears studying the stars like old astronomers. Ah, I could only imagine. I remember when I first read these books, I wrote an email to the author Chris Lacey, and I don't I don't think that he personally replied. It was probably one of his helpers or his assistants, but I got a reply saying that they explored their options of getting a TV show as well way back in the day. This was probably like 2008 or 9 when this was going on, and unfortunately nothing's happened yet. But who knows? Maybe one day, if my influence gets big enough, which you guys can help with, we'll get a show too. And it'll be on Disney Plus. It'll be comparable to like Percy Jackson and all those. If they're getting shows, why can't we? But Thorin tells him that he's on the same path, not for any reason in particular, other than he's following a sign in the sky. Thorin asks Envar if he can read the stars. Once he confirms that he cannot, he tells him that he's a true son of Ragnar. All brute, no brain. Ingvar looks up and studies the sky, and he notices a pulsing yellow star. When Thorin sees that Ingvar has sniffed this out, he tells him that that star is a returning one and hasn't been seen for many, many turns of ice. When I read this, I was wondering if this had a connection to the dragons. Again, it's been a long time since I've read this series, so I don't quite remember everything. But in a lot of literature, Game of Thrones, there's an older story. Not sure if you guys would know it, but Dragonheart, where either a comet or a star reappearing in the sky is what signifies dragons returning to the earth. So that was what my first kind of thoughts slash inklings were. Something's going on, something magical, a little bit more prominent in the world. Obviously, Grockle was born, but this was, earlier. So unless something new is going on with Grockle that we don't know about yet, then I haven't seen any dragons or read anything about dragons returning. Ingvar and Thoran still have their conversation going back and forth. Thoran tells him that everything that ever was or will be came from the center of these lights. As Ingvar is studying the stars and trying to focus on the one pulsing, Thoran puts out his Alma, and he had taken a little bit of time out earlier in this chapter to explain what Alma was to Ingvar. Tells him that it's kind of like your spirit or the fire that's inside you. And so by reaching out with it, you can connect and get deeper understanding of things if you know how to use your own. And in this moment in time, when they're both looking up in the middle of the night, Thoran throws out his Alma to try to connect with what I'm guessing is the universe. And he's hit with a couple of what I would call maybe not premonitions, but just visions, right? He's shown the polar ice caps through time, and then he's shown Ragnar's tooth, the island, not the actual tooth, but the island, and then finally zoomed into Gwain's body. And he lets that out. He says the name Gwain. Ingvar doesn't really react to it at all, and that brings us to the end of that chapter. So it's a little on the ominous side. I do like how astronomy is becoming kind of a thing. Most ancient civilizations were very perplexed and obsessed with the knowledge of what's beyond our world, and so they studied the skies and the stars. That helped them advance our civilizations tenfold. That's how the old island people, the seafarers, they got around. They could coordinate, almost within a mile of what they need based on the stars, which is amazing accuracy when you can't see exactly where you're going without GPS networking or anything. These people were smart. They can get mathematics from it, geography, obviously. So when you're able to study the stars and learn more about your Earth by that, fantastic, fantastic writing. And it's cool that these spiritual slash magical slash immortal bears are also studying the stars. Chapter 6, Joining Dots. Liz finally returns home and kind of starts freaking out once Lucy tells her what she did. Lucy explains that she mailed out the contract because she found it. Liz kind of does a face palm and tells Lucy that she shouldn't have done that. Says that she should have waited, and since it was hidden in there, it should have stayed in there. Liz kind of goes on to explain the reason why she didn't was because she fears that Gwilanna's magic is still tainted onto the contract because of the way that when David was signing it, it bled through to the back page in the 3 scratch mark that's on Zanna's arm, Ingvar's forehead, and David's contract. And it's all the same symbol that Gwilanna uses as her almost calling card at this point, is what I'm going to call it. Well, we actually have a name for it. It's the Mark of Omara, Oomara. But so after Liz is done explaining to Lucy, I had to take a second because I was wondering why would Liz just not tell Lucy? Lucy was there through everything that Gwilanna did. If we don't remember, Liz was passed out for like 80% of book 2 and couldn't do anything. But Lucy knows exactly who Gwilanna is and what she's capable of. So why keep her in the dark about this? That's something dumb. If you're scared about that magic, tell your kid that just watched this evil lady blow up your house and almost try to kill her mother. Tell her that that woman has a plan and we don't want to put it into action. And yet, by keeping her in the dark, thinking that she knows what's best for Lucy, period, which I get it, that's her mom, but yeah, Knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is power. That's what this whole series is about, actually. We need to know the information on the Fire Star, or the Fire Star, on the Fire Tier, where it came from, how it got here, why it got here, what does it do, and yet Liz wants to withhold that information. It's crazy. It's a paradox all on its own. This could have been avoided with communication. Communication, communication. Anyway, Liz kind of puts it aside and says that they'll deal with the consequences as they come, but David does need to be notified as soon as possible. So Lucy passes Liz the phone. And I love reading this because it definitely dates the books. Cell phones weren't as prominent when this was going on, so it says that Lucy passed the cordless phone. I freaking love that. Nowadays, if somebody's writing a book, it would be Lucy asked Siri to call David, or Lucy passed the Microsoft, Samsung, blah, 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 to Liz. Something of a mention of some phone brand instead of just like a cordless phone. Anyway, I thought that was funny. It's a cool little marketing of time, just like the old computer labs in book one. Like nowadays, I think we have libraries that might have multiple computers set up like that. But other than that, I mean, I think not everybody, most people tend to have a smartphone, which is a supercomputer within your pockets anyway. Getting on a tangent. That's besides the point. Anyway, before Liz agrees to call David, she tells Lucy to go grab Gadzooks because she does want to talk with him. She remembers him being a little frazzled earlier in the day about him writing, not necessarily writing, just kind of plodding around the stars. And so Lucy runs down the stairs in order to go get him, and when she steps into David's room, both Gadzooks and Graith were sitting there in deep, deep discussion. Kind of reminds me of a bro down time. I remember when me and my best friend would sit inside of our car and, kids cover your ears, but we'd be eating a sandwich. If you watched How I Met Your Mother, you'll get that reference. But we'd be eating a sandwich and then having deep conversations about just life, the meaning of it, and what's going on. And that's what's going on here with Gadzooks and Graith. I mean, they weren't eating a sandwich or anything, but they were going on and talking about the origins of the universe. And Lucy pops in, kind of interrupts the conversation, tells Gadzook to come over. He flies over to her shoulder without a second thought, and it says that he's almost relieved to be able to take a break and stop thinking about what's working through his mind constantly. Gadzooks had told Graith that there's something going on in the stars, and even the David. Both Gadzooks and Graith call him the David, which is hilarious. It makes him feel a little bit more powerful and regal than I think David ever deserves. But that, I guess those are his dragons, so we'll call him the David. But Graith is still a little kerfuffled and wants to know what's going on with his brother Gadzooks. So as Gadzooks sets down his pencil and pad, he kind of takes a look at it, and he's looking at all the stars, all the dots, and for some reason, just some weird power comes over him and starts connecting them. While he's connecting these dots, he gets this feeling that his job from David's wish isn't fully done yet. Even though we know exactly what happened to Gwen's fire tier, Graith wants to take it the next step and believes that his question, or David's question, is leading more towards how did the fire star begin? We know that it came from the center of the earth and then given to Gwen, but not Gadzooks, but Graith wants to know, how did the fire get into the center of the earth to begin with? How did the earth start, period? He wants to take it to the next step and see where the origins of the universe is, period, now that him and Gadzooks were talking. And so he is continuing to connect these dots of the stars, and it comes to the letter G. Graith gets another sensation and comes to the conclusion that the origins of the universe and everything that is And in my notes, I have the same quote from earlier that Thorin said, all that is or ever will be comes from the center of these lights, because they're both looking at the same star, and they agree that there's something magical and deep about this one particular returning star. Chapter 7, At the Water's Edge. The two bears finally made it, Thorin and Ingvar. They are a couple miles away. They can see the string of lights that border the shore of the town Chamberlain, but between them and the town are a couple miles of open water. They were saying that as they've been getting closer and closer, the ice has been getting thinner, and they're kind of scared to walk through it because they've already had to go through a couple of swimming patches. But Ingvar's still hurt. His shoulder's messed up, and he's not quite sure if he can make the next one. And so Thorin convinces him to rest, that they'll cross the water when the ocean is asleep, waiting for the big freeze. Ingvar gets a little upset because he knows that this might take several days. He's worried that he wants to get this job that he's been uh, put up to by Gwilanna. He wants to get it done so that he can be healed. Thorin isn't very pushy, but he tries to get some information out of Ingvar. He doesn't even ask a question, he just says, whatever mission you have that's putting you into the path of men must be very important. It takes a lot of tenacity or vengeance in your heart. Ingvar didn't like this because it felt like he was starting to fish for information. So he kind of shut himself off and wandered to be alone. Didn't wander too far, it kept him in sight, but he just wanted to be able to think. Thorin goes on to tell Ingvar that men are dangerous. For one light that he sees, there's usually four men, and that if he gets caught, they're going to shoot him again, but this time with a potion, and he'll end up caged no matter what, and either sent way, 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 way back to before they met, like geological wise. They'll take him out to the remote tundra and just drop him, or they'll keep him and cage him for the rest of his life, which I'm guessing he meant like in a zoo, something of that nature. And Thorin asks him, is there any kind of honor in that? Is that what you want? Ingvar gets pretty upset, and he just tells him, when we get to the town, we're going our separate ways. It doesn't matter. I'll be stronger in town. Thorin says that the star will return at nightfall, and they'll be able to use that to guide their way through the water. He tells Ingvar to go rest now, but before he goes to sleep, he asks him if he knows about the Mark of Amara. Says that men in that town will not be kind to him because they know if they're familiar with the old tales. Ingvar gets pretty upset because the old crows said that there is no way anybody would be able to see it, and Thorin goes on to explain that it's only apparent to those who know the stories. So obviously Thorin is, pretty old. Ingvar does ask this if he's Laurel's cub, one of this ancestry just handed down and down, and he's just a storyteller, or who this guy is. And Thorin doesn't really answer. He just says, in time, you will know. Chapter 8, A Special Treat. My first note here is, finally, we're with David, man. Jeez. Not that I didn't like the opening of the book. I've really been appreciating the chapters of the bears. It kind of gives us a nice little change of pace, and um, I'm always fascinated by how animals would react with each other because I do believe that they communicate. Obviously, they do, right? But I guess it's more of, I believe that they have their own language. I don't think we can learn to speak bear, like Dory speaking whale. It's not a thing. We're never going to be able to do it, but they obviously know what each growl, snarl, bark, whine, they all know what it means to each other. So if we could understand their language, it would make our lives a lot easier dealing with a wildlife, period. Anyway, another tangent. We start off this chapter with Zanna interrupting David, saying, is that... She interrupts him by asking him if that's what he's writing and that it's pretty good so far. David kind of goes on to tell the story about exactly what we're reading about Thoran and Ingvar, and now they're kind of washed up on the shoreline, waiting to come over. And this, my next note is: were we reading David's story? Were we just reading what he was writing without us even knowing? Or is it another happenstance, just like in the first book, where what he wrote with Conquer was happening in real life? So is David going to write his own demise? I mean, obviously we know that Ingvar's after David's tooth. Did David plan that? Did David write that? If so, I think his writing is being influenced by Gwilanna even more than we knew. Zanna and David are having a cute little couple moment in the office while she's trying to convince him to give her more information on the story. But she's talking about how one of the leaders at the camp, the Inuit guy, saw her scars. Well, I guess they're not even scars, they're still wounds. They haven't healed over. Zanna says she did go see the medic, and the medic said it's probably just infected, so they gave her some antibiotics and cream to help it heal. But when the Inuit guy saw her wounds, he started wearing around some bones and symbols that are basically warding off evil. Zanna says that he treats her like an evil person, an evil witch, basically, and she doesn't like the vibe that she's getting. Even after all this, David is not going to let her read anymore because he says it's not ready yet. And he's also a little concerned because the Mark of Omara is a big point in his story. He doesn't want Zanna to think that he thinks that she's crazy too or dangerous as well just because of this mark being such a central part. So he decides to hold off and he tells her that she's going to have to wait just like everybody else. David does tell Zanna that he got kind of writer's block and he got a message from Gadzooks. Not necessarily a letter. It was a letter, but not like a written out letter, just a letter from the alphabet, the letter G. And in my notes here, I was wondering, did he get that from Gadzooks or did he get that from Graith somehow? Since Graith was the one that actually connected the dots and wrote out the G, to me it would make sense that Graith sent it somehow, some way, shape, some form, like uh, how in Harry Potter there's the vanishing cabinet. If you close it with something in there, it teleports to the other cabinet immediately. And then, vice versa, it can go back and forth. So is Gadzook's notepad just like that? Like if you, as soon as you're done writing something and then you close it up, does it send that message? Because then any dragon can use it, or maybe Graith is just special because he's David's dragon as well. Because what we didn't get is when Graith did finally write the G, Gadzooks didn't see it. Nobody saw it. It was just Graith. So from my understanding, I mean, Gadzooks could have seen it and then sent it over to David after conferring with Graith, but we never got that confirmation in the books ourselves. So after David is done talking about he might be in writer's block, Gadzooks usually helps him, but he just got a G. Zan is telling him that it's probably a dragon's name because they all start with G's. David ponders it for a little bit, but he's not quite sure because he knows that, or actually, he doesn't know. What he says is just too generic. Which dragon, all dragons, a dragon, could be Gaia as well. That was my thought. But he's just not quite sure, so he's going to take a second and think about it and write more later. In the middle of this conversation, a guy named Russ comes in, and it sounds like he's the leader of this expedition as well. He tells David and Zanna that Anders is caught up in some bad weather and he's not going to be able to make it as of right now, but he needs to send at least 2 people into town to get supplies. Russ figured that since David and Zanna are together, it might be nice for the 2 little lovebirds to get out and go do something. Zanna's pretty excited because that means she gets to drive this old pickup truck that they've been that they've been mobbing around in. And Russ just kind of gives them the rundown. Don't mess up. Don't wreck the car, or else we'll have to come get you in a helicopter, kind of a thing. Uh, he says that here's $200 and not to forget the toilet paper and the beans. Those are very, very important. Before they're starting to head out, David asks if there's a chance that they'll run into bears. I think he's a little on the cautious side because he knows what he's writing, and he's not positive himself on if he has these powers to write the future or not. So, man, like if you're worried about causing your own demise, why would you even write that thing? That's crazy. Crazy work. But I mean, at least good job for being on your toes and making sure. But Russ goes on to tell him that most bears should be on the headland by now, which I'm guessing is just the, shelf of ice that hasn't been melted away from the connection of the town. And basically, they're hunting slash stomping grounds for the main part of the year. But if there are a few stragglers, they could be in town, and Russ wants to make sure that the two know how to handle themselves around bears. Zanna, half jokingly, but is kind of being serious, says that, "Oh, you're supposed to play dead, aren't you?" Russ kind of laughs and says that's not really it. Polar bears are a little different. They'll get distracted easily, though. So if you need to, just drop an item of clothing. The bear should stop to inspect it, and then you can slowly make your way away. He says not to run or not to look them in the eye because it makes them a little testy. Zanna is joking still, and she goes, "Well, what if you run out of clothing?" And Russ just tells him, "Well, there's an unspoken rule, not really rule, but an unspoken law, that everybody leaves their house unlocked just in case that specific thing happens to a bear." And he says, "Honestly, it's better to show up butt naked than to show up dead." So everybody has kind of a good laugh, but now they know bears aren't safe. But after that talk about how to handle themselves with the bears, David and Zanna start loading up and get on their way. And that brings us to the end of the chapter. So, this was a good little opening up of the book. I'm sure once Ingvar and David come face to face, that's when the explosion will happen, and we'll be able to have some more fantastical events. But until then, this has been a very easy, slow open. These first two episodes were kind of short just because these four chapters at a time sections, they are slower since they're opening up. But as we get further into this, we're going to need longer episodes. So thank you for bearing with me. I'll see you next week. Have a safe flight out and hit no turbulence.